Hi, I'm Jackie Lucky, and I just want to give you some tips about if you are thinking or intending on applying for your CISI Level 7 case study. Then here are some tips from me so that you can work it out nice and smoothly in a logical fashion, and hopefully you'll be successful on your first submission. Okay, so first up is make sure that you give yourself enough time. Set yourself time out, blocks of time in your diary right now to make sure that you can do this assessment justice. You are looking at somewhere between 60 and 100 hours of work is involved to complete your financial plan assessment. And you're looking at writing somewhere in the region of 12,000 words, which is no more than 60 pages. Tip number 2 is brush up your technical knowledge. I'm seeing people who are repeatedly failing their first assessment, who have either rushed through the final section, which is the estate planning section, and many actually have flaws in their technical knowledge about the understanding of how assets move between partners in a relationship, whether they are married and particularly whether they are unmarried. There are also a number of issues coming up if you have a case study that has business relief involved. Some people are offering relief as a way of mitigating IHT, but the assets have only been held 12 months, so underneath the minimum time frame in order to claim something like that. So if you're going to brush up any technical knowledge, I would recommend that you brush up your estate planning knowledge. Tip number 3, brush up your spreadsheet skills, whether you're using Excel or you're using the Apple version of spreadsheets. Then in any event, make sure that you know how to create if statements, particularly for your simplified tax calculations in your spreadsheets for your retirement planning. Tip number 4, understand what you're getting yourself into. Many people enter this process of the assessment without really understanding just how complex it is. They quite often get their case study and say to themselves, oh, it's pretty straightforward. But this case study might appear to be straightforward, but the levels of complexity that come into play can be quite significant. And that is because you're not just dealing with 1 or 2 client objectives at the same time. You are dealing with 4 or potentially 5 individual objectives that the clients want to achieve. And they want to achieve those essentially in any event. So that is if they are both well, if either of them is ill, if either of them die, and actually if they both die too. So it's a lot more work than you think it's going to be, because when you start running the scenarios of the various cash flows, looking at what happens if one client is ill and the other one is well, for example, then you've got to think through the impact of that on all of the objectives, rather than perhaps in real life, you might only be giving advice in 1 or 2 specific areas. If the clients say in the case study that their top priority is protection planning, for example, you don't have to do that first. You're covering all of the objectives in this case study. You're not just saying we're going to tackle 1 or 2 and do 1 or 2 again in 12 months' time. You've got to do them all in the round. So it doesn't matter if you do protection first. And actually, I would recommend that you don't do protection first, because if you did that section first, you would make some recommendations based on their current cash flow scenario. And then when you move on to the other technical areas, such as retirement planning, school fees planning, then you are looking at disposing of some of those assets, perhaps changing the ownership, maybe paying extra pension contributions. And then actually you would need to revisit your protection section. Tip number 5 is you have all the answers. When you get your case study to start working on, you will get the assessment criteria, and they are the answers that you have to achieve 51% in each of the overall learning outcomes, with an overall aggregate score of 65%. So you know exactly what you are going to be assessed against. There is nothing hidden. You can't say, oh, the assessors didn't do that, or they did something different. They are marking against exactly the same criteria that you have been given. So no excuses for not making yourself familiar with all the assessment standards. And at the end, before you submit your plan, I would highly recommend that you mark your own financial plan against the assessment criteria that you've been given before you submit it. Tip number 6, do not plagiarize. The CISI will run your financial plan through plagiarism software. You'll be sent a financial plan as an example. If you copy any of the paragraphs out of that financial plan, then your financial plan assessment will be returned unmarked and you will be asked to explain it. So in my courses, I recommend a particular strategy so that you don't actually need to refer to the sample plan that you will be given with your case study. If you want to use it for headings, for example, then that's fine. So just be mindful of that before you start putting pen to paper. Number 7 is you don't have to do this on your own. There is free information on my website to help you get your head around what's involved, but that isn't sufficient to get you through to the end. There are many, many experienced financial planners who really struggle to pass without any assistance. There are courses available. I have 2 different types of courses available to you. The most popular is the supported learning course, which is 3 hours of group sessions, plus 2 30-minute individual one-to-ones, and then a whole library built on a special platform of training materials and documentation to make sure that you do everything in a logical fashion to maximize your chances of passing. We do have people who have passed on their first submission who have gone through our supported learning course and made use of the group sessions and the individual one-to-ones. Hope you find some of those tips useful, and best of luck with your assessment. I look forward to welcoming you as a certified financial planner very soon. That's it from me. Bye for now.